From students returning to the classroom, to broadband issues, to the budget, I speak exclusively with State Senator Sean Bennett for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. State Senator Sean Bennett, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you're one of the state senators out of Dorchester County, and there's so much going on around the state right now. And let me just jump into it. Obviously, as you know, Governor McMaster recently said on Twitter, quote, "We must give parents the choice in how they want their children to be educated, whether that is sending them back to school for in-person learning or keeping them home for virtual learning. They should be able to make that choice with confidence." Let me ask you, Senator, what choice do you have the most confidence in right now?
Well, I think there's confidence is lacking across the community right now, but I think I've heard from our district, our primary school district here at Dorchester 2, which makes up the bulk of what I represent. I think have thought through this process pretty well. They've come up with a plan that I think suits them and suits their parents. The parents were involved in that. It's going to be a challenge for everybody, and parents need to figure out what's going to be best for them, whether it's doing virtual learning, in-person learning, or on a smaller scale. Yeah.
What's that ideal smaller scale right now?
I'm sorry?
What's that small scale right now that's ideal?
Yeah, I think the small scale has to do with classroom sizes for the public schools. When it's safe to go back and be able to distance. I think smaller class sizes, I think most people would agree, is good in any environment, whether it's a pandemic or not. So any environment that we can provide, smaller learning capabilities, I think is good, whether that's in the private schools, the public schools, home schools, or whatever channels parents choose.
And, let me turn to the state newspaper, because this is a developing story that came out earlier this week. And you probably noticed, too, thousands of South Carolina students, that is, who could not be reached during the spring semester after the COVID-19 outbreak shutdown for schools have been located. Senators heard from the state's Child Welfare Agency on Wednesday. Let me ask you this, too, Senator. How many in Dorchester County were not located from March until July?
I don't have that number specifically. The last board meeting I attended, however, where they were talking about their plans for the school district, I want to say that for the most part, all kids in District 2 were accounted for. I'm not going to say every single one, but it was a handful, not the larger sizes that we're seeing in some communities. I think that's a testament both to our community as well as the school district.
And how many have been located as of this week?
I don't know the answer to that, Quintin.
Okay. And let me continue with that article, because it says this: of the roughly 16,000 unaccounted students reported to lawmakers in June, South Carolina's Social Service Director, the new guy, Michael Leach, told the lawmakers that all but 780 students have been located and surveyed across the state. What's that survey like in Dorchester County?
Well, I think the survey is different in every community, but I think in Dorchester County, what they're looking for is they're looking for the well-being of the children, whether they're engaged, whether they're capable of connecting through the online learning. That will most definitely be part of the education process, at least early on in the school year. Make sure that they're able to connect to that. If they're not able to connect to that, remember the General Assembly allocated a significant amount of money, about $50 million for broadband access. A lot of that had to do with Wi-Fi hotspots. So identifying the children that need those Wi-Fi hotspots, getting them to them, as well as just the well-being. The DSS is very much concerned with the safety and welfare of children. And one of the very difficult parts of this pandemic, although there have been many difficult parts of the pandemic, but one of the most difficult for those that are most concerned about our children are identifying the kids that are in difficult positions, maybe in abusive households, those sorts of things. So we want to find out that's the most important part about being able to connect with children and make sure that they're okay.
And I know in a June survey, the education department that is, reported that 16,085 students out of more than 700,000 students, or about 2% of the state's public school population, had turned in little or no work from the virtual classes. And I know this might be a tough question that I should be asking Dorchester District 2, but what was that percentage of students who didn't turn in their work from traditional classes?
In Dorchester too, what
Yes.
percentage did I don't know. We'd have to talk with the leadership of Dorchester too. I know that the teachers did a remarkable job, kind of being thrust into an arena that they are just not used to. Of course, we have some virtual learning in the district, but certainly not on the scale that we had to do. Not only in our district, but statewide. I don't think anybody, even the teachers and educators and administrators, thought that this pandemic was going to last as long as it did. I think initially there was probably a thought process that we needed to kind of get over a hump, a couple of weeks of out of school. That certainly became clear pretty quickly that was not the case. And creating an environment where it was easy, one, for children to connect through that online system, and then holding them accountable and making sure that they turn in their work and that we're able to grade that appropriately to make sure that we can keep kids progressing through their education was difficult to do early on. I think they are much better prepared for it going forward now, starting the new school year, knowing that this is going to be a significant part of the education process.
And how prepared are they in Dorchester County?
I'm sorry?
How prepared are they in Dorchester County?
I think they're prepared. I mean, I sat in on a number of school board meetings. Remember, school boards are duly elected and are making decisions for the school districts in their own communities with the intricacies of those communities. And it sounded to me like that our school districts did very good work in involving teachers, parents, the community as a whole, of trying to design a system that was going to be able to produce and provide the resources that our kids need. The bulk of our children in South Carolina always have been, always will, and currently are in the public school systems. So we need to make sure that those systems are in place. And our district, I think, did a very good job of preparing both for the short term, the middle term, and the long run of how to deal with a challenging school year, ending a challenging school year and beginning a challenging school year this year.
I know that obviously they'll probably have a long-term plan as far as the school districts. What is this long-term plan from the state?
I think the long-term plan for the state has a lot to do with the broadband access. This is something that we've been challenged with for a number of years, trying to figure out the way to get broadband access into the rural parts of the communities. We in Dorchester too, and Dorchester County, Charleston County, Berkeley County, are very blessed that we have a lot of opportunity, a lot of industry, a lot of businesses, tax base to support our school districts. That's not the case in a lot of the rural communities. And while we cover about 90% of the state of South Carolina with broadband access, that last 10% is very difficult and very expensive to get into those communities. The silver lining, if you will, of this pandemic and the resources that were put forward from the federal government allowed us to really jumpstart those activities and get more money into broadband access. I think that is going to be a significant key, not only to education, but healthcare and economic development of getting broadband access into all parts of South Carolina. Now, that's never going to replace the importance of face-to-face instruction, I don't believe. So face-to-face instruction in the safest way that we can during times of high outbreaks, and getting those kids as quickly back into the classrooms as possible, I think is important. And then having the ability to reach them with technology, follows that up. And they all those pillars kind of support quality education system.
And Nick, you talk about economic development. Obviously, with the COVID situation that is affecting the state economy so badly, how has it affected sales tax revenues in your district that you all need to fund major projects?
Well, that's a question that we are trying to figure out. All of our state economists and everybody involved at the county level, the municipal level, as well as state level, are trying to do their best to make accurate projections of what our revenue losses are going to be. I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind that we have losses. Whenever whenever the government shuts down the economy like we had to do, it takes a lot to get that back open. And it certainly, not only does it cut off revenue to families and individuals, it cuts off revenue to government to offer the services that we provide every day, roads and bridges and education and everything else. So we are spending a lot of time right now trying to figure out exactly how deep those cuts are going to be. Now, I happen to believe that we are very blessed in this community and in this state, really, that we have had a very good economic situation over the last 10 to 15 years. We had a very strong and robust economy going into this pandemic. I believe that we will have a very strong and robust economy coming out of the pandemic. But in the meantime, we have to figure out exactly where those revenues are coming, where those shortfalls are coming, and if necessary, where do we need to make cuts or at least reductions in expenditures for a period of time. We were also very blessed in coming in with a strong balance sheet on the state. So we had a number of funds in reserves so that we could withstand a lot of the problems that we had. We just can't withstand it if we have an extended period any more than we do today. So that's going to be our biggest challenge moving forward, is to finding out exactly where those funds are coming from, how quickly we can expect those revenues to rebound, and make sure that we are getting them to the resources that our communities need.
And let me go back to, obviously, the location of some of those kids. The state newspaper says that number was significantly cut over the summer, and Leach says his agency helped located 2,295 of the remaining 3,234 students during the last 3 weeks that needed to be contacted. Senator, how much was that number cut by half in your district?
I don't have those specific numbers, Quintin.
Okay. And I know, obviously, you talked earlier about broadband. Leach says family gave several reasons why students could not complete, obviously, virtual learning in the spring. Some students, as you mentioned, did not have access to computers or internet service, while others did not have transportation to access Wi-Fi and enable buses or to pick up or drop off work packets. How many students in Dorchester County still don't have computers?
Well, in Dorchester County, Dorchester District 2, they are providing computers to every student. Okay. And that's something that I think they had planned to do even before this pandemic. It probably ramped up their deployment of those things, but they are providing computers to every student currently. Let
me turn to the Post and Courier, because this was an article written by Jamie Lovegrove a couple of weeks ago, and it reads this: many South Carolina schools may be dealing with the pandemic without a full-time nurse. And obviously, school districts across the states are scrambling to hire nurses, and the necessity as classrooms reopen amid a pandemic. But they're competing against each other, as well as hospitals that pay much more. Let me ask you this, Senator: how much is the state willing to pay and hire people, and how much will this affect the average taxpayer?
Well, having healthcare providers as close to those children as possible. Sorry, my video cut out there for a minute. Having healthcare providers as close to those children as possible is important. We increased funding last year in the budget to provide for mental health professionals as well as nurses in school districts. So we were in the process of increasing and ramping up the availability of those staff members in the districts. Obviously, the healthcare providers are stressed. The hospitals are stressed. The beauty and the strange thing is a number of nurses have been laid off in hospitals in the past because there wasn't as much of the elective healthcare that was going on to respond to the pandemic issues and the COVID-19 issues. So maybe we can use access to those folks to fill gaps in our schools as the children come back. Anything that we can do to improve access to healthcare at every level, I think, is important.
And I know the Post and Courier also said this: as of late May, about 130 schools had no nurse on campus, and an additional 75 shared a nurse with another school, according to a survey by the State Department of Education. How many nurses are actually needed right now in Dorchester County?
I don't know the specific number of the nurses. I know that they are staffed and they do share schools. And I have not heard from the district that they're having any problems from that standpoint. They have not requested anything specific from the state at this point. We would certainly respond if they did. But I think in Dorchester too, they're able to cover those healthcare needs with the resources that they currently have.
And how many part-time nurses would you all secure for Dorchester County?
How many nurses do they have on staff?
How many part-time nurses do you want to get?
I wouldn't have any idea how many we actually have. I can only tell you that we haven't had any requests of shortages to fill shortages and to help fill gaps that they aren't able to fill currently.
How many full-time nurses were there prior to this pandemic?
I don't know the answer to that.
How many were part-time?
Have no idea. The only thing that I can tell you is that there was not a shortage beforehand. We were not hearing from the school districts or the healthcare professionals that they had a shortage in place. We have not heard since then. Now, there is a shortage of nurses in general in the industry and across the nation. And I think we're seeing that by Trident Technical College, for instance, has started a nursing program not too long ago. Charleston Southern has a nursing program, has for a number of years. So there is recognized that there is a shortage of nurses across the country, but I don't think that the shortage has necessarily negatively affected the activities going on in the school districts today or locally.
Let me ask you this, testing versus infection. How many testing cases are there in your district, and how many are actually infection cases?
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you, Quintin, with the audio, so I'm trying to squint to hear.
Oh, no worries. Testing versus infection. How many testing cases are there in your district, and how many are actually infection cases?
The testing has been increased in our community over the months. MUSC and the South Carolina Army National Guard are producing, are holding public testing availability in the Somerville area. I think Tuesdays and Thursdays, every Tuesday and Thursday throughout. They've seen a dramatic increase in that. The infected cases in Dorchester have been dropping, which is a good thing. We've seen that I think the last number that I saw was about a 7% positive rate. That's a good thing, and the number of cases overall have dropped. So I think we're in a good trajectory. We're certainly not out of the woods yet. Dorchester County has had less exposure than, say, Charleston County and Richland County, certainly. But they are, but we were hit, and we certainly participated in the spike. We saw those types of things, but so far our healthcare providers are able to respond well. They haven't been overwhelmed. Testing is getting done both publicly and privately in doctor's office and CVS's and everywhere that they possibly can test, as well as MUSC's help with more mobile testing units.
If I'm correct, I think you all are too going heading back up to Columbia soon.
We're going back up on the 2nd in the Senate. The Senate's going back on the 2nd. I don't think the House is going back. Okay. We're going to take up some voter issues and how to deal with the general election coming in November. And then we'll go back up September 15th. We're scheduled to go back up, both the House and the Senate, to take out the budget and those things. I think that's kind of up in the air from what I'm seeing in the press these days.
What is the budget looking like right now?
Well, there isn't one right now. So the House had finished their budget and sent it over to the Senate when the whole pandemic hit. And then we saw dramatic reductions in revenue, and everybody kind of agreed there's no way that we can put together an accurate budget not knowing what the economy is going to look like. So we agreed to operate under a continuing resolution, which basically says The expenditure levels of last year will be continued through this year. The anticipation was get through the early stages of COVID-19, get through the summer, get some decent projections in September, October, and be able to complete a budget for the remainder of the year in September and October once we know what our revenues are look like. That's still the plan for the Senate. I think the House has indicated that they would rather operate under a continuing resolution for the entire fiscal year and just do a budget for next fiscal year. I guess it remains to be seen what that process is going to look like, but we're still operating in the Senate that we're going to get together in September. As a matter of fact, I received a letter from Senator Leatherman just the other day that indicated that he wanted to start holding committee hearings on budgets as early as next week. So hopefully we can get something together moving forward.
What do you and Senator Leatherman want to hear during these committee hearings?
I'm sorry?
What do you and Senator Leatherman want to hear during those committee hearings?
We want to hear where agencies are in their expenditures today, obviously, and what they see coming forward, what they're going to need for next year. Obviously, many of our agencies are going to have significantly increased expenditures. DHEC is one of those. Obviously, they didn't plan for a pandemic, although they always plan for a pandemic. They don't necessarily plan for the financial expense in the current budget year. So we're going to need to go back and kind of figure out from them what they're going to need going forward if those revenues or income needs are significantly higher than they have been in previous years. And then compare that with what our economists say is going to be the revenue projections from tax collections. And then we've got to reconcile those things.
And if you were to increase, obviously, money for DHEC, which other departments will have to take a decrease in their budget?
Obviously, those that have requirements that can be delayed. Right? If they have expenditures that can be delayed that don't negatively impact the taxpayer and the citizens of South Carolina, it's always a game of give and take in something like that when you have reduced revenues. So, the last thing you want to do is promise money to an agency and then come back in 3 months later, 4 months later, and have to cut those budgets and say, okay, you can't spend any of that. Oftentimes they're well into the process. So we want to be as accurate as we can going forward to identify where the money needs to be put for the best interest of the public and deploy those resources. And if the needs are greater than the revenue projections, then we've got to make the tough decisions of where we reduce and where we cut. I couldn't even begin to tell you where those cuts need to come at this place because we don't know what the needs are and we don't know what the revenues are. So to go in with some sort of preconceived notion would be a disservice to the public.
Do you know, okay, you don't know where the needs are, but where should the needs go to?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, you said about the needs. Where ideally should it go right now?
Well, I mean, to me, we always need to put revenues and public resources towards the public good to the core functions of government, right? So public safety, healthcare, roads and bridges, those types of core expenditures are always there and are always necessary. It's the ancillary things that we have to identify and decide whether or not when those things are requested by agencies, and we don't know what they are from year to year, the agencies will come to us and request money for project A or project B. It's our duty to determine, one, if that project is a core function of government that even should be funded with public funds, and then two, prioritize those and say, yes, that's a public good, that's a core function of government, that's something that we should do. However, do we have enough money to do that as well as the critical items like public safety, roads and bridges, healthcare? That's always the dance that you play in the budget process.
State Senator Sean Bennett, thank you so much for your time. And again, Welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Quentin, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.